We're ready.
We're ready? Oh,
I think we're ready.
I'm so excited.
Bruh.
Bruh? Bruh?
Bruh.
Bro.
Bruh.
Bro.
I'm Jay Payson with HPTuners.
David Branson, DBR High Performance.
How big of an obstacle was it to...
A dyno is a torque wrench for a car, basically. It reads the power output of a vehicle. So this particular dyno is a hub dyno. It connects where the tires go. The vehicle spins it, it reads the horsepower just like a torque wrench. It's basically a tool.
One of the biggest benefits of this tool is, David, you can go and test a 2,000 horsepower car and not worry about hitting anything going down the street.
Yeah.
It gives you a very controlled environment. You can maintain the cooling. You can exchange the air, make sure there's a consistent atmosphere, things like that.
Is the dyno applying resistance?
This one does, yes. It's a twin eddy current, which is basically a magnetic brake like they use on a locomotive or something, or like some roller coasters. And with amperage, it applies a current. So this will steady state 2,000 horsepower. So I can take, like, if we have the dyno set to only go to 6,000 RPM, and I run a car and it gets to 6,000, it's a 2,000 horsepower, the dyno will stop it. Not instantly, but it'll pull the car down. And I've done that before.
It'll keep it at that 6,000 RPM,
yeah,
right?
Yeah. I've done it before where I forgot that I set it for max RPM of whatever it was, and the dyno has stopped the car on the dyno, and I'm like, what happened? Like, what's wrong? Like, what happened? You know, what's wrong with the car? It ended up being the dyno because I forgot that I had it set to only go so far. So the dyno is a lot stronger than most cars, and it doesn't budge. The good side of that is doing steady state tuning. I can load the car like it's on the street, and I can do pulls like on a big horsepower car. A pull, how long is a pull in fourth gear? 5 seconds, 6 seconds? I can do that. Whereas on a roller dyno, you watch big power cars and they just go, and they're done. That's really not accurate. So with this dyno, it allows me to do my job really, really well, and really accurate. So when I take it out on the street, it's perfect.
Can you translate output from the hub to the motor?
There really is no magic formula. A lot of people will say 15% for manual trans, 20% for an automatic. There's so many variables. How big is the torque converter? How heavy is it? And then the transmission, how heavy are the gears? So no. This dyno manufacturer says 50 to 100. Whatever it makes here, add 50 to 100 to the, and that's what's at the crank. When we dyno OEM cars, I'll use a Hellcat. We do a lot of Hellcats. They will make 660-ish all day long. Every stock Hellcat we've ever put on this dyno is 660 something horsepower, every one. So they rated it 707. So there's your 50 horsepower. It plays true. 2000 Camaros, the Corvettes rated at 460. Take 50 horsepower at that, they make 400 at the wheel. It's basically, they're always in that range. So that number 50 to 100 is pretty accurate. On the big power stuff, they say it doesn't make any difference. You know, if you look at fuel consumption, that tells you power output. And if you look at like fuel consumption on a car we just did that made 1800, the fuel consumption said it was making 1900 to 2000 at the crank. It made 1800 here. So it's on par. But the only way to know is to pull the engine out and put on an engine dyno. And the engine dyno needs to be calibrated exactly like this dyno on the same day in the same room. I mean,
Well,
there's
a lot of variables.
There's so many
as well.
variables.
I mean, temperature alone can change the viscosity of a fluid, and
Yeah.
you know, operating temperatures vary. Spinning a transfer case chain, something like that. Even in neutral, some of these transfer case chains spin. That's going to consume power. So
a rear end that big and heavy, like
absolutely.
those axles. Where do those axles weigh? How hard are they to spin? So it all. I mean, I think the internet does a really good job trying to compare all these dyno numbers, and you can't compare a roller dyno number to this number.
you join angles.
It's apples to oranges.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
it's not comparable.
What's the advantage of this dyno over the roller dyno?
So, being a calibrator, I calibrate vehicles for a living. I've used them both exclusively. I won't tune on a roller dyno again. This is so much more accurate. I'm very picky with my tuning. We build street cars, so drivability is very important. I would tune a car on here and I would take it out on the street and I would make a lot of changes. The difference between the load I would get on a roller dyno versus this is apples to oranges. And this has allowed me to not only get really accurate calibrations, especially big horsepower, but when I take it out on the street, I'm not making any more changes because the load was so accurate. Everything is right on the money. So,
Well, and there's a physical bolted connection from the spinning axle shaft to the absorber.
yeah,
Whereas a roller dyno, you're going to have a contact patch of a tire that's going to vary in size.
yeah. I mean, if you can picture rubber, like one of these treads flexing, that's going to affect the reading, and it's going to flex at some point when you hit the gas. All these tread are going to flex. Well, a tire is going to do the same thing, and then big power stuff, you got tire spin. Well, smoking the tires on the dyno versus just a little bit of spin, you don't know. So if it's spinning, the engine's not loaded as much, so you don't have as good as a pull. So you don't know, if the engine's not loaded, you can run more time and it won't detonate. You put load on it and then it detonates. So you might do a 4th gear pull on a roller dyno and you see those on the dyno, it's 2 seconds, oh, everything looks happy. You take it on the track and that same 4th gear pull, it's in 4th gear for 5 seconds and it detonates and burns a piston. Well, it was perfect on the dyno. Well, yeah, your pull was 2 seconds with no load.
Right.
Because it was spinning. This, I can make the pull as long as I want.
Would you say it's safer?
It's way safer. There's no straps. You can watch a 300 horsepower car or 3,000 horsepower car on this dyno and they're really uneventful. They look the same. There's no difference. The car just doesn't go anywhere. It's married to those hubs. Those hubs are married to the floor. So unless it pulls up the concrete, it's not going anywhere. So it's way safer. And it's actually easier to load. So not having to find somewhere to put straps. All the new cars with the axles and aluminum suspension, trying to sneak a strap through there, it's really difficult.
I've actually run into a situation where a couple of the bolts holding down a plate on a roller dyno actually had come loose, and the plate came up and got in between the tire and the roll set.
Sweet.
And was sent through a piece of red iron in the building that, I mean, if someone was standing behind it, that would have been dangerous. I can appreciate the safety factor that this offers.
The other big thing I've learned on this dyno is it will find the weak spot. If your clutch is not going to hold the power, it will slip, period, because the dyno is not going to budge. If your drive shaft is not going to hold it, the dyno is not going to budge. The other thing is I can go 300 and something miles an hour on this dyno. You can't do that on a roller dyno. So we've had a few mile cars on here that needed to go 250 and make sure they had the gear ratio to do it. Well, we can do it on here. I've had a car at 260-ish and it wasn't any big deal. Like, it really was no big deal. You didn't even know it was going 260 miles an hour.
Wow.
No big deal. So that's another really good benefit. Not every car you're going to do that to, but it's just another facet that we can do with this dyno that makes it really nice. From a calibrating standpoint, this dyno, for you drag racers, the dyno is really good at measuring converter slip, which you can't do on a roller dyno. So if I put the gear ratio and whatever gear it's in, like let's say 4th gear is 1-to-1 and you have a 327 gear. So your final ratio at the axle is going to be 327. If I put that in the computer and it knows it, and it sees the tack, it's going to know if there's any slip. So, and we've tested it on our race car. Our race car, all the parameters we look at, we can see what converter slip is at the end of the track. We were seeing about 3% slip at 8,000 RPM at 180 miles an hour and a quarter mile. This dyno, same gear, same speed, is 3% slip.
Wow.
Time and time again. So we have actually been able to dial in a torque converter before we even get to the track on the dyno. We get to the track and we just saved ourselves tons of steps.
Awesome.
So that's a really neat feature that I didn't realize was going to be so awesome until I started using it. And you can watch clutch slip too. Like you can see the clutch start to slip, the dyno will tell you and you know what's going on. Like even a little clutch slip. So it's really, that's a really neat tool.
That's an impressive tool.
Yeah.
David, when this came to you, I don't want to be so descriptive as to say it was running like crap, but
It was.
It wasn't running great. What was the process that you ended up going through to get to where we are right now?
So my first process is to pull the file off, see what's in the computer, make sure the computer's not locked, make sure everything's working. Pull the file off. I have some generic tables I look at that kind of gives me an idea the level of calibration that's in it, if that makes sense.
Sure.
I can look at a few tables and know if the person did this table right, they probably know what they're doing. Kind of gives me an idea what direction I'm going.
But some of the obstacles, I mean, we didn't know what cam was in it.
A lot of that stuff, so in regards to not knowing what's in it, injectors make a big difference in the tune because it's an actual parameter. You know, it's a 42-pound injector, so that makes a difference. It's a 50-pound injector, that makes a difference. Camshaft can make a difference for doing a base file to
Sure.
help get your base close. But in the end, it's all about data. What does the engine want? What kind of timing does it want? What kind of fuel does it want? All that's going to be based on what I see using the scanner doing a log. So ultimately, it doesn't really matter what cam is in it. It makes my job easier if I know, because then I can put stuff in that I think is going to work
And get a closer base
and
file.
get a closer base. So
That
I'm not
way you're
making the
spending
changes.
less time.
I'm spending less time. But if I don't know, then I just have to start from scratch and say, well, it needs this amount of airflow to run, or I think spark needs to be here. And then it's just a matter of collecting data and seeing, did it like that, did it like this?
So we really need to know what sensors we're dealing with. We need to know the map sensor that's on there, the mass airflow if it is equipped, the injectors and the injector data. And injector data is so very important, particularly when you're building horsepower, and purchasing injectors that have data published.
I
is-
won't. I basically won't. I'm getting to where I don't tune anything unless I know the injectors and know the data.
Understood.
One, I'm out for the absolute best that we can do. If I'm guessing on injector data, doesn't matter
That-
how good my guess is, doesn't matter my experience, it's still a guess.
That's something that has to be defined.
It's something
by
that
the
has to be
manufacturer,
defined.
right?
Exactly. So
And-
there's a lot of times where I don't want to tune something unless we put the right injectors in. Even if the injectors that are in it might work fine, wide open throttle, when you have a drivability complaint about tip in or this, that, and the other, I don't want to chase it and it be an injector data issue when I'm chasing a crappy part.
And this had some drivability issues
did.
when it came in. What were we dealing with? What was the vehicle doing?
It looked to me like a pretty generic can tune. Like I have this engine and it's going in this and this is my injectors. And it was a decent base. Nothing was terrible. I mean,
Sure.
you obviously drove it a while. You drove it some. Like it wasn't terrible. It ran. It just needed to be fine tuned. So fine tuning airflow. Spark was way off. These engines aren't super sensitive to spark, but it all helps. It was really rich at wide open throttle. The fuel trims were not terrible, but you've got a stock MAF housing. So the stock MAF table is going to be decent.
Right there.
The fuel trims, the long trims were on, the short trims were on, so it was compensating. They can do a lot of work. I turn the longs off and make the short within 2-3%.
Right.
That's always my goal. It just needed some basic cleanup work. There wasn't anything major, as you
And-
experienced.
And
But-
so we have customers that will purchase HPTuners and attempt to do the tuning themselves, learning on our forum and things like that. And this is probably a package that I would say that a do-it-yourselfer that's going to do the engine swap himself, that can navigate Excel and has the time to learn, could probably handle the tuning and get a properly running vehicle at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Provided they had a wideband. Might be ideal to rent dyno time. They don't necessarily have to do it on the dyno though.
Yeah.
They can do it just on a safe, straight road.
The most important thing about tuning is data, not the dyno. So if you have a 400 horsepower car, if you have a good wideband and you're collecting good data, you can go do pulls out on the street and get a better tune than you can get on a dyno because it's real world.
Right.
No matter how nice this dyno is, I can't simulate 120 miles an hour with wind, not just going in the radiator, but wind under the car, cooling the exhaust.
Yeah.
The temperature of the exhaust affects the O2 sensor. All that stuff you can't simulate unless you actually do it. So the absolute best tune is all the data on the street, period.
Understood.
But it's illegal to do what you really need to do, and it's dangerous.
Yeah,
So,
agreed.
and you don't get a number. I mean, a number, it's cool
Yeah.
to have a number.
It
It's cool
is.
to know. And it's cool to see gains. Like we had this part, and we were here, and now we're here.
Yeah.
Like it's fun to take a Hellcat at 660 and do a package and get 1,000.
Absolutely.
It's fun to see that gain. So you can't get that. It might feel good here, but you can't get it without one of these.
Well, and
You
when
got to
we-
have it all.
When we talk gains, obviously the biggest gains are going to be down low torque on this, I imagine, because the tune was probably off down low. But up top, it even picked up significant horsepower. What did we see? A little over 20 horse and 20 foot-pounds or so?
Yeah, it was somewhere in there. I think it was 250-ish to 270-ish. Most of that was in fueling. It was really, really rich. Overly safe rich, even on a boosted vehicle. Like I said, these engines are not super sensitive to timing, but it was about 10 degrees off,
Right.
so there was power there.
10 degrees is a lot.
10 degrees is a lot. It's a truck engine though, so they're prone to want to detonate. The knock sensor tables were basically completely turned off, which I don't like to do.
You turn them back on. I
You're
see.
defeating technology.
Yeah.
Like at that point, let's throw a carburetor on it.
Yeah.
Like why turn something off? If you don't know how to tune it, you turn it off.
Well, if
So
you end up
there
with
is
a tank of bad fuel and you end up with detonation, you
Yeah.
might waste a set of upper bearings. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot
Yeah.
can go wrong.
And you're defeating the point of the technology. Like
Absolutely.
And we see that a lot. A lot of things that get turned off because they're seeing it. Or we'll just make it where it can't pull any time in, no matter what.
They're looking for a desired result, right?
Yeah.
And they
And it's not the right way to do it.
Agreed.
It's not the right way to do it. People tune in speed density because they don't know how to tune a MAF right, and it's easier. Well, is it the right way? Is it the wrong way?
it's really pretty simple.
It's really pretty simple. It's a lot easier doing a MAF.
Yeah.
I just don't understand how to make it all work and not throw a check engine light or not go in limp mode. But
How did you learn to do the tuning?
I always just say I was born, and it started then.
Yeah.
I've just always done it. It's always been something I've enjoyed. You know, I started working on cars, and like my favorite part was always doing the tuning and getting it running right. I just love, it's very satisfying for me to take something, whether it's something like this or something at 2,000 horsepower, and you take all these amazing parts and these amazing fabricators making these amazing things, and then get it all to start and run, and it's just fun. I really enjoy it.
Were you largely self-taught, or do you have a calibration background?
I've done everything.
Yeah.
I mean, experience is the absolute best, but anytime I get a chance to take classes to update, I do. If there's software out there, I love to read that software. Even if it's something I already know, there's always something to learn. Somebody always knows something you don't know or experience you don't know. I also have a really nice network of calibrators all across the country.
I'm sure.
That we all kind of feed off each other. Oh, look what I had to do here. I did this and it worked really well. You should try that sometime. So having a nice network, that really helps. But
Absolutely.
ultimately, like getting the software and doing it. Nothing's better than that.
Awesome.
You just got to do it.
I'm Alyssa, and this is my husband, Jay. He was the first employee at HPTuners, and we are now working in the off-road market and trying to help as many people as we can get their Jeeps fixed. There's a lot of misinformation on the market about tuning, and HPTuners wants to try to help inform people. That's our biggest goal right now. Your Jeep does not have to run like crap. It just does not. It can run correctly. Your shift points can be okay. Your TPMS can be set. There's a lot of simple things that HPTuners can help the everyday person who is using their Jeep to off-road or on-road or that sort of thing. Now, there's a whole nother level of it, and that's what we're doing here today at DBR High Performance with David Bronson and HPTuners and the Dyno and the Comanche. We're trying to get the Comanche fixed. It's had some drivability issues. It's lacking some power, and so we thought it'd be a great idea to bring it here and use HPTuners to help fix it with the Dyno and with David. Can you explain more of how that process works? Because that's a little over my head.
Sure. So we know that the Comanche was tuned at some point by someone with something, primarily because it started and ran. So we know the anti-theft was turned off. We aren't sure really what else was done to that file. What we do know is that we can correct the fueling. We know that this was running very, very rich when it came in the door. It was running 10.5s air fuel ratio, and for a street going or a trail going rig that's naturally aspirated, we want to be somewhere in the 12s. There's no reason to consume that much fuel at wide open throttle. So there's some work that David was able to do to lean that out, and he was also able to add a tremendous amount of timing down low. We were only seeing about 12 to 14 degrees down low, and he's got that up around 25 degrees, and I really think you're going to be satisfied with the torque that we gain down low, where we really need it on the trail. So HPTuners is, it was designed initially because there wasn't a product to tune a V6 Firebird, and one of the owners, that's what he had. So what they developed was software and hardware necessary to allow just about anyone to communicate with the vehicle, data log the vehicle, and determine what changes need to be made, and then make changes to the various tables in the computer for a desired result. There's a learning curve if you're going to utilize HPTuners for yourself. However, if you're going to disable the anti-theft and just get something up and running, it's pretty easy to pick up and utilize for that. And then we have a forum that if you want to spend the time to learn how to do the tuning, something like a 5-3 swap is a perfect example where an enthusiast can actually pick up HPTuners, and it'll take 3 or 4 months, but they'll be able to successfully tune their vehicle from there. You don't have to have a dyno. You can utilize any wideband that's commercially available and put a bung in the exhaust and data log, and you can actually compare commanded air-fuel ratio to actual air-fuel ratio in a table that gives you the percentage error, and then apply that to your volumetric efficiency table. And to many that's going to be over your heads, to others it's going to be, I get it. It's kind of like if you're comfortable with dealing with Excel spreadsheets and you just have, 15 rows and 25 columns that are populated and you perform mathematical functions, that's what it's like to make the edits necessary.
But it also can be used by anybody who is interested in correcting their tire size or doing the TPMS. It plugs directly into the OBD2 port. It's a little device. I actually have one for you, Matt, out in my Jeep, and I'll go get that and you can show that in a minute. But it's as simple as plugging into the OBD2 port, and then this device interfaces with a laptop. And you pull up what is the scanner side, which you can do a lot of diagnostics with. You can also change tire size, gear size, TPMS, ABS. There's a lot of, and that's what we call corrections.
Well, and a lot of people don't realize that when they're driving around in a vehicle that's not corrected, we had a customer claim that they picked up 9 miles per gallon. And it's like,
Right.
How in the world are you picking up 9 miles per gallon? Well, it wasn't going into overdrive on the highway, so he's driving at 70 miles an hour in fourth gear instead of fifth gear. And by correcting the speedometer, it went into overdrive, and he helped the fuel economy tremendously in that application. But it also helps around town driving. If you're driving around and you don't have a corrected speedometer for your tires, it's very easy to pick up and utilize yourself. It's affordable. It's $299. It also interfaces with a phone app called Track Addict, and you could take your data from your engine, like RPM and gear ratio and things like that, and overlay that data along with pitch and roll as you're going up and through these various trails. And how many times have you shown a video and it's like, man, that video just doesn't do it justice. That thing was a lot steeper than what you're seeing. Well, now we can actually quantify that in degrees. We know that, I've seen 39 degrees and that feels sketchy, but we can quantify that. We can see how much it's rolling as well. And that's also an HPTuners product, and it's a free download. It's called Track Addict, and that works with any smartphone.
The HPTuners product or product line, there's something for everybody. Whether you're just a beginner learning about the importance of calibrations and corrections and tuning, there's basic functions to help you get your feet wet, and then it can evolve into so much more. And I've had some of my personal customers become great tuners just by utilizing the forums on HPTuners. So it's a device for everybody. It really is.
With a face made for radio.
We all can't be graced with these good looks.
What are you doing down there on the floor?
Watching it all unfold.
I saw this.
And I just have to say it's the funniest thing because when people ask how Jay got into what he does, we tell people he was born. That's it.
All right, we're gonna figure out how much horsepower the Comanche has. You ready?
I'm gonna start it up. I'm gonna let it get to operating intent before I make a pull. I usually will flash the lights or do something to let you know I'm gonna make a pull in a few seconds, just so you know, for purpose of the camera. And then I will pull it up to the start speed, and then you'll hear the engine go, and then I'll release it. It'll make a pull, and then it comes back to an idle, get the axle stopped, and then put it back in gear, turn it off.
So you'll be in the car when that's happening.
Yep. I'm doing it in second gear because I don't want to spin. I don't want this thing to go 150 miles an hour because the way the gearing was, I've had too many drive shafts come off. I can keep drive shaft speed down. I keep drive shaft speed down.
So on the dyno, then it doesn't matter what gear you're in?
It does big time on a roller dyno, big time. On this dyno, because of the load, it doesn't matter. We have, like a lot of the trucks, 130-ish miles an hour, they throw a drive shaft, like some of the Chevy trucks. They can't go that fast from the factory, so that's not a problem. But you put them on here, and you do a dyno in 1-to-1, it's like 150 miles an hour. Well, you might throw a drive shaft. Don't ask me how I know that. And a lot of times it'll break the transfer case and break the rear of the trans.
Let's not do that.
It's epic. I mean, it's actually, you can look at the floor and see where one of them happened. So on this dyno, I can set load where, like, you know, second gear, if you can picture on a street, like if you floor it and it shifts into second gear pulls for 4 seconds on like a regular car, you know, I mean, somewhere in there, you know, 30 miles an hour to 80 miles an hour, takes 4 seconds to do it. I can load the dynos so second gear has the same load as the street. So it's really no different at putting it to the floor out on the street in second gear. That's the nice thing with a load dyno, you can do that. I can load it. This one, I mean, I had to make a pull in first gear it was this crazy rock crawler thing, but first gear was really high. So I had to put the load really high on the dyno, and you floor it in first gear, and the front end really came up, but it was, you know, 4 or 5 second long pull in first gear. And then I'll save it. You'll see something.
Take a picture of that one.
You'll see, yeah, take a picture of that one. You'll
See,
see,
people think it's got 605
you'll see something like
Hell
that.
yeah.
That's actually that 730 horse saline.
Put that
Can you go back
605
to the other
back.
one? I'm gonna put this on the group chat where you're on it and Ian's on it, and get Ian thinking it just pulled 600. It's gonna be awesome. It's gonna be epic.
I mean, I could make it even more.
Tell him.
No, the 600 is be realistic. Like, he might believe the 600.
No, no.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Yeah.
He's playing a little prank on Ian Johnson. Gonna tell him that it pulled
What happened to the line?
604.
Technology's great.